So we are going to go through the Lesson 5 and Lesson 6 review together as a class. Okay. So the first thing that I noticed when grading the quizzes is that some people just did not use the directions because it said use synthetic substitution to find f of -1. This is what I saw, and I wrote these were worth 3 points, -3, and I moved on as soon as I saw that this is what you did. Why? Why, when I saw that, did I immediately put minus however many and move on? Go ahead. Yes, I am supposed to use synthetic substitution. Is this synthetic substitution? No, that's called I plugged it in. Okay? You could use this to check your answer. Okay, but when we are going to do this, we want to make sure we are using synthetic substitution. So, this is not synthetic substitution. If it says to solve using synthetic substitution, you have to solve using synthetic substitution to get your points. So far, so good? So synthetic substitution looks more like synthetic division, where we have a box and our coefficient. What number is going to go in the box? If we want to find f of -1, what do I put in the box? -1. Whenever x shows up alone, it's always going to be showing up as -1. If it was showing up as a factor with x, it would be x plus 1. Okay? Because x equals -1 would be the same thing as x plus 1 equals 0. These are the same. So if it's by itself, it shows up as -1. If it's a factor, it shows up the opposite. Okay? So that goes in the box, -1. Across the top are my coefficients. What do I always have to check for when I go to do this? Placeholders. So the degree of the very first one is 3. I have -1, 3, 2, 1, 0. Do I need any placeholders? Nope, not in this case. So I have -1, 5, -2, 14. Okay, that's my setup. That will give me my very first point on the quiz if I can set it up correctly. Okay? My second point will come from actually solving it and then finding the right answer. So you're going to bring down the first one, multiply by the box. What is -1 times -1? 1. Write it down here. What do I do with 5 and 1? Add them up. You get 6. 6 times the box, -6. -2 and -6, add them up. -8. Multiply that by the box. +8. 14 and 8 make 22. So this answer should be 22. Now, because I know this is how I was supposed to plug it in, I am going to use that method to check and make sure my synthetic substitution was correct. That's the way I can double check my work. Okay? So I'm going to plug this all into my calculator. Negative of -1 to the power of 3. Make sure you use the caret button to go to the power of. Plus 5 in parentheses, -1. We're squaring that one. -2 in parentheses, -1. Plus 14. What should I get when I hit enter? Hopefully I get 22, and I do, so that tells me, cool, I must have done my synthetic substitution correctly. Go ahead now, and let's set it up for f of 7. Same idea, but set it up for f of 7. So, what do we get when we do synthetic substitution with 7? -98 is what I got too. Okay. Now, I also plugged that one in, and it worked the same way. So you can use this method of plugging it in to check, but not to show our work. Okay? So let's look at this next one. We're going to find f of -1 given this one now. Now this one's a little bit trickier. Why? We have placeholders in this one. So in the box, what number goes in there? negative 1. Okay? 6, I don't have a 5 or a 4. So if you want to like just jot them down, I have a 3, I don't have a 2. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 I have. So I'm good with the rest of them. But I need placeholders in place of 5, 4, and 2. So the first one becomes a 10. And then I don't have 5 and 4, so I'm going to have 2 zeros. 3 is a 5. I don't have a 2, so that's a 0. I have negative 4 and negative 4. Okay, so double check. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Looks good. I know that my answer is going to be in that last spot. Okay, so try number 2 for both A and B, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so let's take a look at these. For the first one, we should get 5. We should have a negative 1 in the box. Here's our numbers across the bottom, and out pops 5 there at the end. Okay, so most people, there was a couple of people that I pointed out, try to find your error too. Okay, it's a great time right now to figure out where we're finding those errors. Okay, so we should get 5 on that one. Now the next one, we end up with a really big number. That's normal in polynomials to have really big numbers sometimes because you're taking things to such high power. So when we take something 7 to the power of 6, we're to plug it in, right? 7 to the power of 6, 7 times 7 times 7 times 7. It's normal that that's going to be a very large number that we're going to be dealing with. Okay? So if I go over here, would have helped if I even had a little bit more room on there, but I should get 1,178,173. Okay. Give me a 1 through 5. I feel like I can do these on my own because I was shocked as to how many people got these wrong on their quiz because I thought that those were easy points. Okay. So those ones are supposed to be the easy points. I'm not trying to trick you in any way with those. Okay, but you have to follow the directions and solve how it says to solve, which I did put up on the PowerPoint as a reminder also. So make sure you're reading that. When taking the quiz, make sure you go back and read through all the directions before you submit it. Turn it in. Put it in the bin. Whatever. Okay. Is the binomial a factor of the given polynomial? Use all 3 methods. So let's talk about this first. How do we know if a binomial is a factor? How do I know if x minus 4 is a factor of that polynomial? Go ahead. The remainder has to be 0. If the remainder is 0, that means what? That it goes into it nicely and it's a factor. Okay, if your remainder is anything but 0, then it would not be a factor. If you have a remainder of 1, 2, 3, 4, I could keep going. If you have a remainder of negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, I could keep going. If you have a remainder, it is not a factor. But if your remainder is 0, we can say it's a factor. So what then is the 3 methods that we can figure out what the remainder is? You could plug it in. So that would be one option, plug it in. What else? Synthetic division would be one. So plug it in, synthetic division. What's the third one? Long division. Okay, so let's go in that order. We can, 1, plug it in. We can, 2, use synthetic division. Or 3, use long division. So then let's actually try these. What am I going to plug in? Let me minimize this part. Here we go. What is it that I'm going to plug in if I'm trying to plug it in? I'm trying to figure out for x minus 4. So what is x if you get it alone? X is positive 4. So what we're trying to find here is f of 4 equals, and plug it in. So we have x to the 3rd power plus 6x squared minus 10x minus 8. And then go through and we're actually going to plug in the 4. Now all we have to do is use our calculator. 4 to the third power plus 6 times 4 squared minus 10 times 4 minus 8. I'm going to double check that that's exactly what I need here, because one of the biggest issues is the whole plugging it in thing and missing something in a parenthesis. Usually if you know what you're doing and you lose points, it's from something silly of just typing something in wrong. So I have x to the third plus 6x to the second minus 10 times x minus 8. I'm going to hit enter, and f of 4 is 112. What does that tell us if f of 4 is 112? It's not a factor, because what would your remainder be? It would have to be 0 to be a factor, so this is your remainder is 112, so it's not a factor. Okay, you had 2 of these questions on your quiz, and it did not matter which method you used. You could use any method. So if you like that method best, go with that. Okay. Next is synthetic division. So let's try synthetic division. What's going to go in the box this time? -4. Yes, did you have a question?
So I don't know how, but I got 64 instead of 112.
Then you typed it in your calculator wrong.
Well, I got 16 plus 96 is 112.
60 plus 96. Where are you get what?
16.
4 to the third power is not 16. That's 4 to the third power. So again, you type. Well, look up here. It's x to the third power up here, right? In your equation. So that has to be 4 to the third power. Okay. All right. So synthetic division, and -4 goes in the box. Then, what are my coefficients here across the top? 1, 6, -10, -8. Okay, do I have any placeholders? No. What is the number in front of x to the third if there's no number there? Some people put 0 on their quiz. If it was a 0, it wouldn't be there at all. It would become nothing. Okay? If it's there, it must be multiplied by 1. It's an invisible 1. So 1x to the third, 6x squared, -10x, and -8. There are no placeholders. 3, 2, 1, 0. Bring down that first number. Multiply by the box. Add those up. Multiply the 2 by the box. Add those up. Multiply that by the box. Add those up. Is x plus 4 a factor of that polynomial? No, why not? The remainder is not 0. It has a remainder of 64. So it's not a factor. All right, the last option is long division. Go back to our old school method. That's the only time we write it out as x minus 5. X to the third power plus 6x squared minus 10x minus 8. I don't have any placeholders I need to write in. here's my setup. X times what would give you x to the third? X squared. So remember, then we take x squared and we multiply by x minus 5 because that's what we're going to have to subtract here. And we would have x to the third minus 5x squared. But no one likes to subtract, so you have to distribute that negative sign. Now we have x to the third and negative x to the third are going to combine to nothing. We have 6x squared and a 5x squared that combine to 11x squared. Bring down the other terms. X times what number am I going to put up top will give me 11x squared. 11x. So plus 11x. I'm going to multiply 11x times this binomial. Okay, usually I write it over here. You don't have to, but, and I'm running out of space, so I could have minus 11x times x is 11x squared. 11x times negative 5 is minus 55x. You're subtracting this binomial, so you're going to have to make both of those terms opposite. So add a negative there, and that will turn that into a positive. 11x squared and negative 11x squared are going to cancel. Negative 10x and a positive 55x will be 45x. Bring down that negative 8. X times what number will give us 45x? 45. So you're taking 45 and multiplying by this binomial. I'm going to have 45x minus 45 times 5 is 225. I'm subtracting this binomial, so I need to make sure that I distribute that negative sign to both of those signs. This will change to a negative, and this will change to a positive. 45x and negative 45x are going to cancel. Negative 8 and a positive 225 is going to be 217. Once you get it down to your final number, that's what? Your remainder. Is this a factor if our remainder is 217? No, not a factor. Those are the three ways you can use. On the quiz, I did not ask for a specific way. I said you could use any method. Questions on this first page of the review? All right, then let's flip this over. And before we even actually try and solve these, I am going to give you a couple difference in sums of cubes and a couple quadratics to just factor. Okay, so the first thing let's talk about is our two rules, because a lot of people lost silly points because they did not have the rules correct. Your rules were directly from our notes. We have two rules. We have a cubed minus b cubed, and we have a cubed plus b cubed. When we factor it, it's turned into two things that multiply together. So what are these two things that we multiply together? If it's a cubed minus b cubed, what does that factor into? It is just a rule from your notes. Okay, and it's open notes, so you guys should have been able to just copy it down. What does it factor into? A minus b is the first factor. What's the second factor? Very good. A squared plus ab plus b squared. Now this one is very similar, but the signs are a little bit different. So this one starts with the first factor is a plus b, Now this one still has an a squared, it still has an ab, and it still has a b squared, but one of those signs is negative. Okay, so that one right there. So all you have to do is figure out what is the a value and what is the b value, and if you can figure out those two things, then you already know the signs. So this one here is a subtraction one, so it's going to look like this. A binomial times a trinomial. Since it's the subtraction, the negative sign is going to be there. I'll have a plus sign and a plus sign, and I can figure out the rest. But I know how it's going to look. So I have to ask, we have to figure out what is the a value and what is the b value. What are you cubing to get x to the third? What do you cube or multiply by itself 3 times and get x to the third? X. What do you multiply by itself 3 times and out pops 8? 2. So fill it in. In this spot, we're going to have the a. The a is x. We write x. In this spot, we have a b. We're going to write b is 2, so we'll write a 2. In this one, we have a squared. So what is x times x? X squared. In this middle one, we have a times b. What is x times 2? 2x will be the middle term. The last term is b squared. So what's 2 times 2? Okay, nap time's not an option right now, so we should be writing this down. Okay, that's all I'm asking you to do on these problems. Factor it. That's factor form. We're done on that one. Okay, that's all I'm asking you to do right now. I want you to go through here. I'll do one more with you. We'll do number 4 together, and then I will let you factor the rest of them. Okay. So for number 4, this is the sum of 2 cubes. So we're following the rule that you have a plus b times a squared minus ab plus b squared. So there's our signs for this one. Now we'll just have to fill it in after we figure out, okay, well, wait a minute. What is a going to be and what is b going to be? So what do you multiply by itself 3 times and get 8x cubed? 2x. What do you multiply by itself 3 times and get 64? 4. So this is our a spot, so 2x goes here. This is your b spot, so 4 goes here. This is your a squared spot, so what is 2x times 2x? 4x squared. This is your a times b spot, so what is it if you multiply 2x times 4? 8x. And this is your b squared spot, so take b and multiply by itself. What's 4 times 4? 16. Okay. So let's try all 8 of these of factoring. You have 2 of them done. You have 6 more. So 1 should look very similar to 2. Okay, the only thing that's going to be different there is where that subtraction sign is. Okay, so you have an x, you have a 2, you have an x squared, a 2x, and a 4. The only thing difference is the only subtraction sign is here, whereas the only subtraction sign is going to be here. Okay. Raise your hand if you got 1 and 2 correct. Cool. How about 3 and 4? Again, I gave you the same numbers. It was just the difference versus the sum. So these ones should be 2x minus 4, 4x squared plus 8x plus 16, or 2x plus 4 times the 4x squared minus 8x plus 16. Raise your hand if you got 3 and 4 correct. Okay, let's check number 5. 5 and 6, your a value is going to be 3x. Your b value is 1. So for number 5, you should have 3x minus 1 times the quantity of 9x squared plus 3x plus 1. For number 6, you should have 3x plus 1 times the quantity of 9x squared minus 3x plus 1. Raise your hand if you got 5 and 6 correct. Number 7, your A value is x, your B value is 3. The difference, you're going to have x minus 3 times the quantity of x squared plus 3x plus 9. And for number 8, when it's the sum of cubes, the first one is x plus 3 times x squared minus 3x plus 9. Raise your hand if you got 7 or 8 correct. 7 and 8. Okay, do we want to try another one? Give me like a 1 through 5. I can figure those out on my own. I got those down now. Down to a 1. I'm not sure how to do those. Maybe 4 is like I get it right most of the time, but sometimes I make little errors. 3 is like I still need some work on that stuff. Okay. All right. So then now that we have that factoring down, let's look at factoring another way using the U substitution method. Okay. When we are dealing with something to the 4th power and then something squared, we can rewrite this using U substitution. Okay? So I would instead write x squared equals u. And the way that I can rewrite this then is this is going to be u squared plus 5u plus 4. And the reason why I wanted to write it like that is because now it looks more familiar as a quadratic, and you can factor it into 2 binomials. This is unfoiling it. You're factoring it. Okay? Now I'm going to do the FOIL part in my head so that way I can make sure that I'm factoring it correctly. What times what would give you u squared? U times u. So that's your first times your first. Now your outside and your inside are going to be a little iffy, so that's kind of a, we'll wait on that. Okay? But your last times your last has to multiply to what number? 4. So what are your options there? 2 and 2 or 4 and 1? So it's trial and error. Plug in 2 and 2. If I FOIL this, my outside is 2u, my inside is 2u, what would my middle term have to be? If I had an outside is 2u and an inside is 2u, what would my middle term have to be? It would have had to be 4u. Is the middle term 4u? No, it's for me. No, I'm just kidding. It's not for you, so I have to try the other one. If I make it 4 times 1, which also equals 4, what is the outside now? 1u. What is the inside? 4u. Does 4u and 1u make 5u? Yes. Yes. Like if you put 1 here and 4 here? In this case, no. But sometimes it does. When that leading coefficient is different, it would matter, because if you had like a 2u here and this number was 1, it would be multiplying it by 2. So yes, it can matter sometimes. In this case, as long as one of the factors is u plus 4 and the other is u plus 1, it does not matter if you have u plus 1 and then u plus 4 or u plus 4 and then u plus 1. Yes?
Is there a way for you to know, like you said in the case where it does matter where you put it? Is there
trial and error is going to be your best option, which is why I wrote those ones in pencil, and then I'll go back and I'll write them in my pen. Okay, I'm confident that that's the right answer. I FOILed it. It worked. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so try these 6 problems. Okay, so for this first one, what's the first thing that or for number 2, what is the first thing you're going to do? X squared will equal u. So then this becomes what? 2u squared minus 7u minus 4. And then we'll work at factoring. So your first times your first has to multiply 2u squared. So what times what would give you 2u squared? 2u and u. Okay, that'll give you 2u squared. Now your outside and your inside will create that negative 7u. But your last times your last has to multiply to negative 4. So this is where I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to have to do a couple trial and errors. So what's something that multiplies to negative 4? So positive 1 and negative 4. But then you're going to have to FOIL this and make sure this will actually work. We did already test our first times our first, and we can see our last times our last will multiply to negative 4. But what does your outside multiply to? Negative 8u. What's the inside multiply to? Does negative 8u and 1u make negative 7u? Yes, and that was just a lucky guess that we did that on the very first try, or maybe you guys already did your trial and error and found it in that order. But yes, that is that in factored form. Now someone said, well, the numbers that you pick had to add to negative 7. No, negative 4 and positive 1 do not add to negative 7. Your outside times your outside plus your inside has to multiply and then add to the negative 7. Okay, so that's why it's important that you refoil it and make sure that you factored it correctly. Are we okay with number 2? Let's try number 3. What do we do first here? X squared equals u again. So what's this become? U squared minus 4u minus 5. Okay, then we're going to break it up into factoring. What times what will give us u squared? U and u, and u and u and u. Okay, u and u. All right, and then the last times the last has to multiply to negative 5. So what are some options here? Okay, so if I do negative 5 and a positive 1, let's try the outside. What's the outside multiply to? U. What's the inside multiply to? Minus 5u. Does u minus 5u get us the negative 4u that we're looking for that middle term? Yes, it does. So then, let me erase my extra work there. Put this in the pen, and I'm good to go. Is that okay? Let's try this next one. What's first? X squared equals u. What's this then become? U squared minus 6u plus 9. Okay, then what? Break it apart. First times your first has to multiply to u squared. So what's your first and your first have to be? U and u. Okay. Your last times your last has to multiply to 9. So what are some options there? Negative 3 and negative 3. I'm going to check that before I write in my pen. My outside would then be what? Negative 3u. What's my inside? Negative 3u. Does negative 3u and negative 3u make negative 6u? Yes. So this is the proper way to factor. However, what do you notice about those two factors? They're the same. So you could write this like that also. Okay. All right. Number 5. How about someone new who hasn't spoken out loud and been sharing answers? How am I going to do this one? I can't say names right now because it's recording. So, gentleman in the off-white shirt. What am I going to do first?
2u squared minus 5u.
Okay, before I do that, though, I have to write what?
I don't know.
What's the first thing that I had to write in every single one of these before I could change it?
Squared equals u.
Yeah, x squared equals u. I need to state that first. And then I can change this to, yes, 2u squared minus 5u minus 3. So that's good. Okay. And gentlemen in the green sweatshirt, what do I do next?
I put parentheses 2u minus 3.
Hold on, before you get ahead of me. So I'm going to set my two parentheses. My first times my first has to multiply to what?
2u squared.
Okay, so if this is 2u, this has to be u. Okay. And then your last times your last has to multiply to negative 3. So what are some options there? Okay, so negative 3 and a positive 1. So if we FOIL this, my outside becomes what then? What's my outside going to be? Gentleman in the green sweatshirt still.
Negative 5.
Negative 3 times 2u.
Negative 5u.
Multiplying.
Oh, 6u. Negative 6u.
Negative 6u. Okay. My inside is 1 times u, which was what? 1u. What is negative 6u plus 1u?
Negative 5u.
Did it work? Yeah, okay, so then we can put this in marker. Good, so that one's factored. All right, number 6. Gentleman in the white and gray sweatshirt. What am I going to do first?
I didn't get this one.
We'll try. What am I going to do first?
X squared equals u.
Okay, x squared equals u. So then what does it become?
U squared minus 49.
Okay. Some people like to write this like this. That would be fine too. It doesn't matter. Okay. Other gentleman in the gray sweatshirt. What do I do from here?
I said u minus 7.
U minus 7 and,
U plus 7.
okay. U times u will give me u squared. Positive 7 and negative 7 multiply to negative 49, but check your outside inside because you have to make sure that it goes away. Your outside would be 7 times u is what?
7.
Okay, negative 7 times u is? Okay, 7u minus 7u, does that give us 0 u's? Yes, it does. So we're factored. Okay, you have to know how to do all of this factoring before you can do numbers 6 through 9 on the review. So let's go back to number 6 on the review. Oh shoot, we did this one first, so it's been a minute since we did this factoring. But that's okay. The first thing that we're going to do here is we have to factor it. Well, guess what? We just practiced like 8 of them. So what is your A value? What is your B value? And how does that left side factor? Okay, that's why we practiced this. I gave you guys like 8 different problems. So what do you multiply by itself 3 times and get 8x cubed? 2x. What do I multiply by itself 3 times and get 27? 3. Now I can go to actually filling in using my rule. Gentleman in the yellow sweatshirt, what's my rule say?
2x plus or minus 3.
Minus 3, good.
And then 2x to the second.
Okay, so what is 2x times 2x? 4x squared, okay.
And then 5x.
Plus, multiply these together. What is 2x times 3?
6x.
Plus, what's this one supposed to be?
B squared.
3 and b squared, so take 3, square it. What's 3 times 3?
9.
There we go, we factored it. That's why we practice that, because it's important. That's our very first step, is to actually factor that. Once we have it in factored form, why is that important? Why, if we're trying to solve the polynomial, do we want it in factored form? Go ahead. Oh. Okay, go ahead. You're on the right track. We are going to use quadratic formula soon, but why is it that we needed it in this form versus that form? Go ahead. There's something before we get to quadratic formula. Go ahead.
Is it to get all 3 answers?
We're looking for 3 answers. Yes, that is why we have to do this, is because we have to be able to get all 3 answers. Some people try to add 27, divide by, do something funky, and it's not going to give us all 3 answers. Okay, but why does factored form then give us all 3 answers? What do I do from this point? Before we find A, B, and C. Go ahead.
You said both of them equal 0.
Yes. The reason I need it in factored form is because if you have 2 things that multiply to 0, I know that either 2x minus 3 equals 0, or I know that this factor, 4x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. And if I know those 2 things, it's awesome because I know how to solve both of those things. How do you get x alone here? Add 3. Then what? Divide by 2. X equals 3/2. Check, there's one answer. You could plug it back in and verify that it works. That's always a good option. 8 times, we'll put 3/2 in parentheses, to the power of 3, minus 27. What should our answer be? What should our answer be if we typed it in? Should be 0. And look at that, it is 0. Cool, we have one of our 3 answers. We're looking for all 3 of them. So then, okay, this is going to give me 2 of my answers. How do I need to solve that one? Quadratic formula. So x equals negative. Maybe write it up top just so you have it. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Because we're going to need that. So x equals, the opposite of b is negative 6, plus or minus the square root. We're going to have 6 squared minus 4 times our a value is 4, our c value is 9, divided by twice our a value is 4. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to simplify parts of it. We have to plug in the calculator. What's underneath here? So we're going to have x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of something over 2 times 4. I know the bottom is going to be 8. Okay, so let's plug in under that radical into our calculator. So I have 6 squared Minus 4 times the a value is 4, times the c value is 9. I should get negative 108 under there. I'm on the right track. What do I have to do now that I know that underneath that radical is negative 108? I'm going to have to go off to the side and actually simplify what is the square root of negative 108. What's the first thing I'm going to do when I simplify this radical? Pull out the I. So the negative becomes I square roots of 108. Then what? What's a perfect square that goes into 108? Well, try them. 108 divided by, start with 4. 4 works, but there's probably something bigger, because I can see there's still a perfect square that goes into 27. 108 divided by 9. Ooh, that works too. But there's also a perfect square that goes into 12, so there's got to be something larger. 108 divided by 16. Doesn't work. 108 divided by 25. Doesn't work. 108 divided by 36. Cool, that works. There are no perfect squares that go into 3, so I know 36 is the largest. So how I'm going to write this is I square roots of 36 times the square root of 3. So what does this then become? 6i square roots of 3. So that's what's going to replace right here. I have x equals negative 6 plus or minus, that's 6i square roots of 3 over 8. All right, well, I'm going to write this out. X equals negative 6 over 8. What does that reduce to? Negative 3/4 plus or minus 6 over 8. What's that reduce to? 3/4 I square roots of 3. How many answers is this right here? 2, because of that plus or minus. How many answers have I found in total? 3. So now I'm done. All right. Factor number 7. What is your A value? What is your B value? Gentleman in the gray sweatshirt, what is your A value? What do you cube to get 64x cubed? 4x. Okay. Gentleman in the black sweatshirt, what do you cube to get 125? 5. So then we have to follow our rule. Gentleman in the navy sweatshirt, what is this first factor then going to be?
4x plus 5.
Oh, wrong navy sweatshirt, but that's okay. 4x plus 5. Okay. This gentleman in the navy sweatshirt, what is this factor then going to be?
16x plus.
How about 16x squared?
Yes.
Okay.
Plus 20x.
Minus. There's a minus sign there.
Minus 20x.
Okay, minus 20x. Good.
25.
Plus 25. Good. So you have the numbers down, but we got to check and make sure we have those signs down also. Okay, what's the purpose of putting it into factored form? Because then you set both equal to 0. So take the 4x plus 5, set that equal to 0. Take the quadratic here, 16x squared minus 20x plus 25 equals 0. Do you know how to solve both of these? Yes, that's what we've been practicing so much. Solve this one first. That's the easy one. Green sweatshirt. Go ahead. Tell me how I'm going to solve this. Okay, subtract 5 from both sides. This is what I get. And then what? Divide both by 4. And what do I get for x? How about just negative 5 over 4, because that's what it says. Right? Don't make it any harder than what it already was. Don't go to a calculator or anything there. Just leave it as that fraction. You can double check it. You could plug in 64 times that negative 5/4 raised to the third power plus 125, and I should get the 0 that it says that it is. Cool, it worked. Alright, well let's try the other one then. When I go to solve the pink one, I have to use quadratic formula. I could try and factor that, but it's not going to be factorable, so that's why I resort to quadratic formula. So, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the opposite of b shows up, plus or minus, take b, square it, minus 4 times the a value is 16, the c value is 25, all over twice a. I'm going to have to plug in what's underneath that radical in my calculator. Let's find an answer for what's under there. 2 times 16 is 32, so I know the bottom is going to be 32. What's underneath that radical, though? Go ahead and type that in. What am I getting for under that radical? Negative what?
2,000?
I don't think it's negative 2,000. I don't think it's 12,000 either. I think it's 1,200. Negative 1,200? 1,200? Does that look okay? Okay. So then we have to take this, go off to the side, and what do I do with that first? Pull out that I square roots of 1,200. What is 1,200? Okay, well, I can see 100 goes into it. But if I do 1,200 divided by 100, there is still a perfect square that goes into 12, so there's got to be something larger. Alright, so the next perfect square would be 121. 1,200 divided by 121. Doesn't work. The next perfect square is 144. 1,200 divided by 144. Doesn't work. 13 squared is 169. So 1,200 divided by 169. Oops. Doesn't work. So 14 squared is 196. 1,200 divided by 196. Doesn't work. 15 squared is 225. Doesn't work. 16 squared is 256. Nope, doesn't work. 17 squared is 289. Doesn't work. I have a feeling it's going to be 400, which is 20 squared. So I'm going to skip ahead. 20 squared is 400. So 400 goes into it 3 times. Okay? But if you have to go one by one, then do it that way. So this breaks down into I times, what does 1,200 break down into? 400 times what? Times 3. What's the square root of 400 though? 20. So we have 20 I square roots of 3. That's what we're going to replace here. Okay, yes.
So I did 25, 48, because there's no square root of 48, but there's square root.
But then if you pick something smaller than 400, then you're going to have to continue to break it down, and this has to be your final answer. So if you did it a different way, like, yes, I could have seen that 100 goes into it very easily, and I would have had this. And then I'd have I square roots of 100 times the square root of 12. Well, that's 10I square roots of 12. But the problem is there's still a perfect square that goes into 12. So 12 is not broken down as far as it needs to be. So then I have to break this down again into 4 times 3. And if I do that, I'm going to get 10I times 2 times the square root of 3, which is 20I square roots of 3. There are lots of other perfect squares that do go into 1200, but the problem is 400 is the largest one, and that's why you have to pick 400. If you pick one of the smaller ones, this work tends to be a lot longer, and there's more room for error if you do it that way. But you have to get it down to 20I square roots of 3. No other answer is acceptable.
So how would you know that that is?
Because I don't have a perfect square that goes into 3 other than 1.
There's no perfect square that goes into 48 either.
What about 4? There is a perfect square that goes into 48. 4 goes into it.
Yeah.
Also 16, I believe, goes into it. So that doesn't work.
Okay.
You'd have to keep breaking it down further. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So back up here then, where I have this, I'm going to take and I'm going to now write it as x equals 20 over 32 plus or minus 20 over 32 I square roots of 3. What is 20 over 32 reduced to? And then this is 2 of your answers. And you've already found 1 up there. So there's all 3 answers. So far, so good? All right, so then let's try these other 2 that have to do with factoring also. Solve the polynomial by factoring. All right. First thing you're going to do, now this is what we just practiced with factoring. What am I going to do here? X squared equals u. Because then I can write this as u squared minus 7u plus 10 equals 0. And from there, I can easily factor the left side, which will allow me to set both my factors equal to 0. So go ahead and factor this. What does this one factor into? Raise your hand if you get it. In the burgundy sweatshirt, go ahead. Good. U minus 5 and U minus 2. Okay. Now that we have that, we take both of those, we set them equal to 0. So we know U minus 5 equals 0 or U minus 2 equals 0. And those are pretty easy to solve because U will have to be 5 or U will have to be 2. And I'm done, right? No. Am I looking for U? No. I'm looking for X. So what is U actually representing? X squared. So I go back up here and I say, oh yeah, this is X squared equals 5 and X squared equals 2. Well, then I can keep solving from there. What do I do? Square root both sides. And I'll get that x equals the square root of 5, and I get x equals the square root of 2. I have my two answers. I'm done? No, I forgot to do the plus or minus. How many answers am I looking for? 4, which is kind of my reminder of, oh yeah, I'm going to need a plus and minus there for both of those. Now here, you can actually plug these back in. You could plug in the square root of 5, because these are real answers. Square root of 5, oops, to the 4th power, minus 7 times the square root of 5, square that, plus 10. And look, it equals 0. It worked. You could try the same thing, but put a negative sign in front of that square root of 5, because it's negative square root of 5 also. Oh, look at that. It also turns out as 0. I could try it with negative square root of 2, so change the 5s to 2s. And I can see it also works. You can plug these back in and see if they work. That's the cool thing when you get real answers. Can't plug them in when they're imaginary, but you can plug them in if they're real. All right, using this same idea over here with the x squared is equal to u, I'm going to change this to u squared plus u minus 12 equals 0. And now I'll have to factor that. So what does this one factor into? Yes, u plus 4 and u minus 3. Set them each equal to 0. U plus 4 equals 0. U minus 3 equals 0. U is negative 4 or u is 3. Are I looking for u? No, I'm looking for x. So change them. X squared equals negative 4 or x squared equals 3. Square root both sides. X equals the square root of negative 4. X equals the square root of 3. What did I forget? Plus or minus. Can I leave it the square root of negative 4? No, I need to simplify it. What is the square root of negative 4? We wouldn't say I2, so we would instead say 2i. So x equals positive or negative 2i, or x equals positive or negative square root of 3. We can leave that one. We have 4 answers, and we're done. Okay. The next one says that it's giving us one of the factors. Gives us a polynomial and one of its factors, and it asks us to factor this completely. What do I do if I need to factor this completely? I don't have to plug it in. I know if I plug it in, my remainder is going to be 0 because it told me that it's a factor. Synthetic division is going to be your thing to go to here. What goes in the box? 1. X to the third, start with a 1. 3, 2, 1, 0. So 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2. We're just doing synthetic division here. What does my remainder have to be? 0. If I don't have a remainder of 0, then I did something wrong because it told me that that was a factor. So it has to have a remainder of 0 because it has to be a factor. So what's my next step in this part? I know I factored out x minus 1. What is left?
X squared plus 3x plus 2.
Yes. Use these numbers here to write our answer, what was left. We divided out x minus 1, and this is what was left. So this is the factored version of what I originally started with. Okay? Is that factored completely? No, I can keep going. So leave the x minus 1 there and factor this quadratic. First times your first has to multiply to x squared. So an x and an x. Your last and your last has to multiply to what? 2. So what are we going to have here for our numbers? Plus 2, plus 1. Double check. Outside's 1x, inside's 2x. Does that get us to 3x? Yes. How do I know that this is factored form? How do I know if this is correct? How do you check it, though? You want to make sure that if you multiply these three together, we get what we originally started with right here. So if you multiply the first two together, you get x squared plus 2x minus x is going to be plus x minus 2 times that by the x plus 1. You could use the box method here if you want, or distribute. X to the third plus x squared minus 2x. I distributed the x to all three. Distribute the 1 to all three. Plus x squared plus x minus 2. Combine like terms. X to the third is the only term. X squared and x squared does equal 2x squared, which it's supposed to. Negative 2x plus x does get me negative x. And negative 2 is negative 2. It equals what we started with. So we did it correctly. Okay. Try number 11 on your own. All right, so let's take a look. Did not write that one down right. There we go. So we have x plus 7 is what we factored out. And we're going to be left with x squared plus 4x minus 21. How did we do up to this point? Did we do okay there? We did the synthetic division part right? Yes. Do you have a question?
I have a question about how we get x squared plus 4x minus 21. Is it the
1,
okay.
4, negative 21. This is your remainder. Degree 0, 1, 2.
Okay.
So that's an x squared that goes with that. A degree of 1, just the x, and degree 0 doesn't have anything. So that's where this comes from.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so then once we have that, we factor it further. We have the x plus 7 still out front. This will factor into x plus 7 and x minus 3. Does it matter the order that we multiply three numbers in? No, you can rearrange three numbers. So as long as I see an x plus 7, an x plus 7, and an x minus 3, you have all three factors, you're good to go. Now you could take this one step further and actually factor it and write it like this. That would also be acceptable. And I would even give you a bonus point if you got to that part. Okay? Because that technically is more factored than this here. Alright. Now you can multiply that back out. And when you multiply this back out, hopefully you get x to the third plus 11x squared plus 7x minus 147, which you should. Yes?
Can you explain how you get into the factor form? Is that 3 thing?
From here to here?
Yeah.
So I'm just factoring this like we've been practicing. So first times your first has to multiply to x squared.
Right.
So I know that I has to be x times x is the only thing that gets me to x squared. I know my last times my last has to multiply to negative 21. Since it's a negative, I know one of my signs has to be positive and the other negative. Because that's the only way I can multiply something to a negative is if they have different signs.
Oh, wait, so it's the same thing, just add in thing to the top?
Yeah.
Okay. I know how to do that.
Okay, so then your outside is negative 3x, your inside's 7x, which does get you to the 4x.
Okay.
But double check your outside inside, because some people were getting negative 4x for that middle term, and they would realize that when they refoil it, that they don't have the right answer if they factored those wrong and had the wrong signs or whatever. Okay. 21 and 1 don't work because it doesn't give you a middle term of 4. So, okie dokie.